Coming in at level 1, we have Billy Wilkins, the elderly spirit from The Conjuring 2. Now, I know Bill seems terrifying when he's possessing Janet Hodgson and speaking through her in that gravelly voice.
Why don't you just leave these people alone?
Because this is my house.
But hear me out. He's actually not the real threat here. Bill Wilkins died in the Enfield house and his spirit lingered, but he's not inherently malevolent. The poor guy is actually being manipulated and used as a puppet by a much more powerful entity, Valak. Bill is essentially a victim himself, being forced to terrorize the Hodgson family against his true nature. When Bill speaks through Janet, he's genuinely trying to communicate and even warns the family about the real danger they're facing. It's not me you need to worry about. It's what's behind me, he tells them. That's not something an evil entity would typically do, warn their victims about the actual threat. Bill's supernatural abilities are relatively limited. He can possess Janet temporarily, move some objects around, and create cold spots, but these are pretty standard ghostly activities. He doesn't have the power to cause serious physical harm or manipulate reality on a large scale. The really telling thing is that once the real demon is dealt with, Bill's hauntings essentially stop. He was never the source of the malevolent activity, just an unwilling conduit for something much darker. What makes Bill even less threatening is that he actually wants to help. When the Warrens figure out what's really going on, Bill becomes an ally rather than an enemy. He's been trying to warn them all along. Bill Wilkins represents the tragic side of the supernatural, a spirit caught between worlds who gets used by truly evil forces. He's scary when you don't understand what's happening, but once you realize he's a victim too, he becomes almost sympathetic. That's why Bill Wilkins lands at level 1. He looks threatening on the surface, but he's actually trying to protect the family from the real danger. At level 2, we have the Crooked Man from The Conjuring 2. This nursery rhyme nightmare is definitely creepier than Bill Wilkins, but he's still more of a manifestation than a true independent threat. The Crooked Man appears primarily to Billy Hodgson, the youngest boy in the family, taking the form of the character from the nursery rhyme. There was a crooked man. He's tall, impossibly thin, and moves in unnatural jerky motions that make him deeply unsettling to watch. What makes the Crooked Man more dangerous than Bill is his ability to physically interact with the environment in more aggressive ways. He can chase people through the house, manipulate objects with more force, and create genuine physical terror. When he chases Billy through the house, there's real menace there. The Crooked Man also demonstrates more sophisticated psychological manipulation. He specifically targets the youngest, most vulnerable member of the family, using a familiar nursery rhyme to make himself seem almost playful before revealing his true threatening nature. But here's what keeps the Crooked Man from climbing higher. He's still essentially a puppet. Like Bill Wilkins, he's being controlled and manifested by the true power behind the Enfield haunting. He's more like a supernatural attack dog than an independent entity with his own agenda. The Crooked Man's abilities seem to be limited to physical intimidation and basic poltergeist activity. He can chase and frighten, but he doesn't show the kind of reality-warping power or possession abilities that make the higher-level entities truly dangerous. Plus, once you understand that he's just another manifestation of the real threat, the Crooked Man becomes somewhat predictable. He follows fairly standard haunting patterns rather than displaying the cunning intelligence of more powerful entities. The Crooked Man is effectively a supernatural boogeyman, genuinely frightening in the moment, but ultimately just another tool being used by something much more powerful and intelligent. That's why the Crooked Man lands at level 2. More actively threatening than Bill Wilkins, but still just a manifestation rather than a true independent supernatural force. At level 3, we have La Llorona from The Curse of La Llorona. This weeping woman represents a significant step up in supernatural power and independent malevolence compared to the previous entities. La Llorona, or the Weeping Woman, carries with her centuries of grief, rage, and supernatural power accumulated from her tragic origin story. She drowned her own children in a jealous rage and was cursed to wander between worlds, forever seeking to replace the children she lost. What makes La Llorona more dangerous is her focused motivation and her ability to operate independently across large areas. Unlike Bill Wilkins or the Crooked Man, she's not being controlled by another entity. She's pursuing her own agenda with single-minded determination. La Llorona demonstrates serious supernatural abilities, including teleportation, reality manipulation, and the power to appear and disappear at will. She can manifest physically enough to grab and drag victims, particularly children, and she's strong enough to overpower adults when necessary. Her targeting is both more specific and more terrifying. She specifically hunts children, driven by her need to replace the ones she killed. This makes her incredibly dangerous to families, and her ability to track and pursue specific victims across distances shows sophisticated supernatural intelligence. What really sets La Llorona apart is her persistence and emotional intelligence. She doesn't just randomly terrorize. She studies her targets, exploits family dynamics, and uses psychological manipulation alongside her supernatural powers. She turns her family members against each other and exploits existing tensions. But what keeps La Llorona from climbing higher is that her power seems to have limitations. She can be warded off with religious protection, and she's ultimately bound by the rules of her curse. Her obsession with replacing her children while making her dangerous also makes her somewhat predictable. La Llorona also shows vulnerability to faith-based defenses and can be reasoned with to some degree, suggesting that despite her power, she's not at the highest tier of supernatural threats. That's why La Llorona lands at level 3. She's a genuinely independent and dangerous supernatural entity with serious power, but she has exploitable limitations and specific behavioral patterns that can be used against her. Coming in at level 4, we have Malthus, the demonic entity that inhabits the Annabelle doll throughout the Annabelle film series. This demon represents a major escalation in supernatural threat because it combines intelligence, deception, and the ability to manipulate multiple people simultaneously. Malthus is not just any demon, it's an entity specifically seeking human souls, and it's patient and cunning enough to spend years working toward that goal. Unlike the previous entities that mainly focused on terrorizing, Malthus has a clear agenda. It wants to claim souls for hell. What makes Malthus particularly dangerous is its ability to use the Annabelle doll as a perfect conduit. The doll serves as both an anchor to our world and a deceptive facade that makes people lower their guard. Who suspects a creepy but inanimate doll of harboring a powerful demon? Malthus demonstrates sophisticated psychological manipulation, particularly with Janice in Annabelle creation. It doesn't just terrorize her, it grooms her, slowly building trust and dependency before revealing its true nature. This shows a level of strategic thinking that puts it far above simple terrorizing entities. The demon's power set includes possession, reality manipulation, telekinesis on a large scale, and the ability to influence events across multiple locations. In Annabelle Comes Home, we see it can activate and control other supernatural artifacts, essentially turning the Warrens' entire occult museum into a weapon. What really sets Malthus apart is its patience and long-term planning. This entity can wait decades for the right opportunity to claim a soul. It manipulated the Mullins family for years, turned Janice into a killer, and continued influencing events across multiple families and time periods. Malthus also shows resistance to standard religious protection and requires specific rituals and extreme faith to banish. It's not easily dismissed and can return if the conditions are right, showing a tendency that makes it genuinely threatening. But what keeps Malthus from the highest levels is that it's ultimately bound to the doll and can be contained if properly handled. While it's incredibly dangerous when active, it does have limitations that can be exploited by knowledgeable opponents like the Warrens. That's why Malthus lands at level 4. It's a genuinely powerful demon with long-term planning abilities and serious supernatural power, but it has specific weaknesses that can be used to contain it. At level 5, we have Bathsheba Sherman from the original Conjuring movie. This witch represents elite-level supernatural power and comes closer to complete success than almost any other entity in the franchise. Bathsheba was a witch who lived in the 1800s and cursed the land around the Perrin family farmhouse. She sacrificed her own infant child to Satan and killed herself rather than face justice. But her death only amplified her power and allowed her to continue tormenting families over a century. What makes Bathsheba incredibly dangerous is her territorial control and her specific hatred for mothers. She doesn't just haunt randomly, she systematically targets mothers, attempting to possess them and force them to kill her own children, repeating the cycle of her original sin. Bathsheba's supernatural abilities are extensive and terrifying. She can possess people completely, manipulate reality on a large scale, create physical manifestations, and exert control over the entire property. The way she transforms Carolyn Perrin shows the full extent of her possession abilities. The psychological sophistication of Bathsheba's attacks is what really sets her apart. She doesn't just terrorize, she psychologically breaks down family structures, turns family members against each other, and exploits each person's specific fears and weaknesses. What makes Bathsheba particularly elite is how close she comes to complete success. She nearly forces Carolyn to kill her own children and would have succeeded if not for the Warrens' intervention. This isn't just harassment or terror, this is near-complete victory over her victims. Bathsheba also demonstrates the ability to affect the Warrens themselves, which very few entities can do. She attacks Lorraine directly and nearly kills Ed, showing that even experienced paranormal investigators are not safe from her power. Her connection to the land itself makes her extremely difficult to banish. She's not just haunting a house, she's claimed an entire area as her domain, giving her tremendous power and making standard exorcism techniques less effective. But what keeps Bathsheba from the very top is that she was ultimately defeated by the Warrens through exorcism, and her power seems tied to specific locations and circumstances rather than being truly limitless. That's why Bathsheba Sherman lands at level 5. She's an extremely powerful witch with near-complete success against her victims, but she has specific limitations that can be exploited by knowledgeable and faithful opponents. At level 6, we have Annabelle herself, not just the demon that inhabits her, but the doll as a supernatural conduit and beacon for demonic activity. What makes Annabelle more dangerous than even Bathsheba is her ability to attract and channel multiple supernatural entities simultaneously. Annabelle the doll is not possessed by just one demon, but serves as a magnet for demonic activity. She attracts evil spirits, amplifies their power, and provides them with a physical anchor in our world. This makes her incredibly dangerous because you're never dealing with just one threat when Annabelle is involved. What sets Annabelle apart is her passive power. She doesn't need to actively hunt or manipulate. Simply being in her presence creates supernatural chaos. In Annabelle Comes Home, her very presence in the Warrens' occult room activates every other supernatural artifact, turning the entire house into a supernatural battleground. The doll's influence extends beyond just summoning entities. She amplifies existing supernatural activity and can turn benign spirits malevolent. She creates what's essentially a supernatural storm around herself, making any location she's in exponentially more dangerous. Annabelle demonstrates intelligence and cunning that suggests something more than just a conduit. She can manipulate people into making specific choices, engineer situations that maximize chaos, and seems to have a strategic understanding of how to exploit human weaknesses. What makes Annabelle particularly terrifying is her permanence and persistence. Unlike entities that can be banished or exorcised, Annabelle as a physical object continues to exist and influence her environment. She's been contained but never truly defeated, always waiting for an opportunity to create more chaos. The doll's ability to affect multiple people simultaneously and across different time periods shows a level of power that transcends normal supernatural limitations. She's influenced the Annabelle Higgins case, the Mullins family tragedy, and continues to threaten the Warren family decades later. Annabelle also shows resistance to standard containment methods. The Warrens have to use multiple layers of protection, last locks, holy water, regular prayers, just to keep her contained, and even then she occasionally breaks through. But what keeps Annabelle from the absolute top level is that she can be contained with proper knowledge and faith-based protection. While she's incredibly dangerous, she has been successfully contained by the Warrens for years. That's why Annabelle lands at level 6. She's a supernatural nexus that amplifies and attracts demonic activity on a massive scale, making her one of the most persistently dangerous artifacts in the Conjuring universe.
You failed everyone in your life.
Finally, at level 7, the absolute peak of Conjuring universe evil, we have Valak, also known as the Nun. This ancient demon represents the ultimate supernatural threat in the franchise, combining immense power, intelligence, and the ability to manipulate reality on a scale that dwarfs every other entity we've discussed. Valak is not just any demon, it's described as a powerful Marquis of Hell, commanding legions of lesser demons and possessing power that spans centuries and continents. Unlike other entities that are tied to specific locations or objects, Valak can manifest anywhere and influence events on a global scale. What makes Valak absolutely terrifying is its intelligence and strategic thinking. This entity doesn't just terrorize randomly. It orchestrates complex, long-term plans that span multiple countries and decades. In The Conjuring 2, Valak manipulates the entire Enfield haunting as part of a larger scheme to kill Ed Warren and break Lorraine's faith. Valak's ability to disguise itself and manipulate perception is unmatched. It can appear as the Nun, mimic other supernatural entities like Bill Wilkins, and even impersonate living people. This shape-shifting ability makes it nearly impossible to predict or prepare for its attacks. The scope of Valak's power is demonstrated in the Nun films, where we see it can corrupt entire locations, turn religious sanctuaries into hellish nightmares, and influence multiple people across vast distances simultaneously. The Abbey of St. Carta becomes a literal gateway to hell under its influence. What puts Valak at the absolute top is its ability to affect the Warrens themselves, the most experienced and protected paranormal investigators in the franchise. It nearly kills Ed Warren multiple times and specifically targets Lorraine's psychic abilities, showing it can overcome even the strongest faith-based defenses. Valak demonstrates reality warping abilities that go far beyond other entities. It can create pocket dimensions, manipulate time and space, and alter the fundamental nature of locations to suit its purposes. The way it transforms environments shows power on a cosmic level. The demon's persistence and adaptability are what make it truly unstoppable. Even when seemingly defeated, Valak finds new ways to continue its influence. It's been active for centuries and shows no signs of being permanently banished or contained. What makes Valak the ultimate conjuring demon is its combination of raw power, strategic intelligence, and its ability to corrupt and destroy everything it touches. It doesn't just want to kill or possess. It wants to drag souls to hell and corrupt the very foundations of faith and goodness. Valak represents evil in its purest, most intelligent form, an ancient force that understands human nature completely and uses that knowledge to exploit every weakness and fear. It's not bound by the limitations that constrain other supernatural entities.